What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to go ahead and rank all 30 NBA teams on this tier list. At the top, we have the favorites, the two squads that I think today have the best chance of making the NBA Finals. I could definitely see it. Squads that, if you told me at the end of the year they are raising the Larry O'Brien trophy, I am not surprised at all. Outside shots, I would be a little bit more surprised, but I think there is still a world. Playoff probables on the cusp, they're right there where I think they could be a playoff team, could end up missing it just barely. Lottery teams, self-explanatory, and capture the flag. Squads that by the end of the year will be tanking as much as they can to get the number 1 overall pick in the draft and pursuing Cooper flag. So we're going to go through, put all 30 NBA teams on this list. These are not my official predictions on how the standings are going to go ahead and shake out because I'm going to reserve all that officially for when I make my full season predictions video closer to the beginning of the year. But in the moment, this is how I feel about all 30 NBA teams. Let me know down below in the comments what tier you think your favorite team should be on, as well as hit the like and subscribe button while you're down there. Let's get into it, starting off with the reigning champion Boston Celtics. No surprise here. They're going to be my favorite in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you just take a look at the roster where they just dominated the NBA en route to the championship. I know they played some injured teams. In my opinion, it would not have mattered. They had one of the best net ratings in NBA history, and they did all of that without Kristaps Porzingis really playing that much. They've got Jason Tatum, who's a top 10 player, and I feel like he's gotten underrated at this point. He was just an all-NBA first-teamer. They've got Jaylen Brown, who's an all-star, all-NBA level player. They've got two of the best guard defenders in the world in Derek White and Jrue Holiday. Porzingis, when healthy, is a massive X factor. They are going to start the season without him, but by the end of the year, I imagine he'll be back with the team at full strength. They've got depth with Al Horford and Xavier Tillman. They've got Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard. They even brought in Lonnie Walker, who I love as a pickup, assuming he makes the roster. So yeah, I've got no complaints at all about the Celtics team. They're loaded top to bottom, and there's a reason they are, again, the favorites to win the championship. Following them up, we have the Lakers, who I'm going to put in playoff probables. I imagine there are people who say, oh, they could have like an outside shot. There are going to be some people that say they're on the cusp for a lottery team. I'm going to put them right in the middle. Last year, I trusted them a lot. I thought they're going to be a top 3 team in the West, and even with LeBron and AD being pretty healthy, they were a play-in team. Now, I know they went from Darvin Ham to JJ Redick, and I am excited about that coaching switch. I think it can make a difference, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them to be a championship contending team. If they make a big trade, maybe that changes, but as currently constructed, I like LeBron and AD a lot. They're both top 10 players. AD is one of the best defenders in the world. LeBron, of course, when he's on the team, anything is possible. But outside those two guys and a couple of decent talents like Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell, I just don't really trust their depth. I don't know how much I trust the two of them and LeBron and AD to be healthy because they're both on the court a lot last season, and it still resulted in them being a play-in team. So yeah, I'm not going to bet against a team that has those two top talents to miss the playoffs, but I'm not going to pick them to be one of the top teams either. Phoenix Suns are also going to go in that same tier for a similar reason. I like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker a lot as a duo. Bradley Beal is a good player, and he really figured it out towards the end of the season with the Suns, but it just feels redundant having him on the roster a little bit. I like that they added Tyus Jones and Monte Morris as a couple of ball handlers that aren't going to turn the ball over very much. They're going to control the pace, and I think having those two playmakers will be big for that team. I do expect them to be one of the best offenses in the league, and maybe as a whole be a better team than last year, assuming they stay healthy, which when you take a look at the trio of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant is never a guarantee. Even with Mike Budenholzer into the fold, I just don't think this team is going to go from getting swept in the first round to a championship contender. I just don't think there's enough swing factor here for them. Offensively, they could definitely be better, but defensively, I think they're going to take a drop off. This is a team that does not have many great defenders, and they have a couple of injuries. This is a team that's going to rapidly descend down the standings. Maybe they prove me wrong and everything really clicks, and they do end up as one of those outside shot teams, but I'm just not ready to go ahead and say that after, again, they got swept in the first round last year by a much better Minnesota Timberwolves team. For the Jazz, I'm between lottery and capture the flag. I'll go lottery because I think they'll be better than a couple of the teams I'm going to put in the capture the flag tier, but I do think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. They're not going to have a good record at all, despite having some good talents like Lauri Markkanen and Colin Sexton, who may be my pick for the most underrated player in the NBA right now. They've got John Collins, Walker Kessler, like they've got established guys, but I could also see a world where they trade a few of those players throughout the season. The past couple of years, the Jazz have had like a good start to the year, but then by midseason, they really go into tank mode, especially if they deal with some injuries. And I think going after Cooper Flag and getting that really like lockdown cornerstone guy with Lauri Markkanen locked up long-term in that new extension would be huge for them. So maybe by the end of the season, they're one of the capture the flag teams, but I'll put them in the lottery for the moment. For the Clippers, they're going to be our first on the cusp team. I know there are a lot of Clippers fans who are pushing the agenda that they got better this offseason with adding like Chris Dunn and Mo Bamba, of course, Derrick Jones Jr. to fill the wing gap of Paul George, but I do think losing him is such a big blow to this squad because it removes a lot of their upside. Sure, the role players they added are good. I don't think they had a bad offseason in terms of how much worse it could have gone, but I do think it went bad. I think they're one of the biggest losers of this summer, and that by losing Paul George, if it wasn't already shut, the championship window has slammed closed. Now, Kawhi Leonard is still really good, and Harden is also a phenomenal player. He's still an all-star level talent, but that top two is not nearly as good as some of the other top twos in the Western Conference, and beyond that, even though I like some of the depth pieces, I think overall the depth is decently weak. It's a team that's also going to for sure deal with some big injuries. I don't know if Kawhi Leonard is ever going to have a healthy playoff run again, which sucks. And they just feel so clearly on the way out that they're trying to do whatever they can to remain relevant while they have these two stars. But if you told me next summer that Kawhi and James Harden were both gone, I would not be surprised. I think they could for sure make the playoffs. I'm definitely not putting that out of the realm of possibility, and maybe they surprise me because they do stay healthy, but I think they're going to inevitably deal with injuries, and they'll be one of those teams that maybe makes the playoffs, but if they make it, they're going to just barely squeak in. And another team that I think is in that same tier are the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry, still one of the best players in the world. I mean, he showed it clearly in the Olympics. But losing Klay Thompson, even though Klay wasn't great last season, he was a really good volume three-point shooter, even if he was a bit streaky. They added like DeAnthony Melton and Buddy Hield, but Melton hardly played last season. I don't know how much he's going to be on the court, and I don't think he's a massive difference maker for this team. Buddy Hield was very up and down with the Sixers. Even when he was with the Pacers, it was up and down. It feels like he's starting to regress a little bit. Draymond is still there as an all-world defender, but I don't think he's going to provide enough to really make this team one of the best defenses in the league. I don't think they're going to be one of the best offenses. There's just neither side of the ball I feel confident they're going to be amazing on. Like, who's the second option for this team beyond Steph Curry? Is it Pods? Is it Kuminga? Is it Wiggins? I don't really know. I don't like a lot of their depth. They're relying on a lot of really young players that are pretty unproven. This Warriors team could make the playoffs because they do have Steph Curry, but similar to the Clippers, it just feels like they're kind of on the way out. They're trying to do what they can to keep themselves competitive, but I don't think it's going to result in anything more than a play-in spot, and maybe they sneak into the playoffs, but it's not going to be a top 5 seed worthy squad. Next up, we've got the Spurs, who I'm also going to put in the lottery, which now makes me think maybe I should move the Jazz down. I think the Spurs team is going to be solid this year. Victor, of course, is going to have an unbelievable second season. The addition of Chris Paul is going to go ahead and be big. They still have Keldon Johnson. They've got Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan. Even though the point guard stuff wasn't great last season, he's improved. Harrison Barnes is a good veteran addition. Like, this is a team, as well as Trey Jones as a point guard off the bench, that has some real talent. And when you have that top-end player in Victor Wembanyama, who I believe will establish himself firmly as a top 15, maybe even top 10 player by the end of the season, there's so much upside with your team, especially if Chris Paul can stay on the court. I don't know if he will because it's Chris Paul at this point in his career, but however many games he plays, if he can play 60 plus, there is a world, in my opinion, where the Spurs are right there on the cusp of being a play-in team. I just think it's a year early because they do still have a lot of really young, unestablished talent that are trying to figure out their roles. They're trying to find their way right now in this new Wemby era. Give it a couple more years, they'll be championship contenders, but for the moment, I am going to have them still as a lottery team. Wemby's first playoff appearance is going to have to wait another year. For the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to put them, and I could definitely see it. They're not quite my favorites, but if you have them as your favorites, that's not a surprise at all. They're 100% championship contenders. They were just in the finals. They've got one of the best players in the world in Luka, an elite second option, and a great supporting cast. They still have PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, another year for Derek Lively to get better. I'm really excited to see what he can do in year 2. And they made some additions like Najee Marshall to replace Derek Jones Jr., Klay Thompson to give them some reliable three-point shooting, which they did need, especially like you saw in the finals against the Celtics. They were just leaving a lot of their guys open for above-the-break threes. You can't do that for Klay Thompson. They added a guy like Quentin Grimes, who I'm interested to see what he could do because they had a lot of potential in New York. It was kind of rough for him with Detroit. And now you put him here in a great offensive system next to a couple of really good playmakers in Kyrie and Luka. Maybe he could get some more open shots and really find some of his previously viewed value that he had in New York over here in Dallas. So yeah, this is a squad that will for sure be in the title hunt. They'll be in the top 4 seed hunt. And if they won the NBA championship, not surprised at all. Same thing with the Denver Nuggets. Now, I do think they got worse, and I know they lost in the second round, but I'm not going to bet against a team with Nikola Jokic as a championship contender. He's the best player in the world. If Jamal Murray has a better playoff run, if Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon continue to be the players that they are, and Christian Brown really steps up, especially if they make a couple of fringe additions throughout the season, I do think they're going to have to make some type of deals. But like, they do have interesting pieces like a Russell Westbrook. If he really pops here in Denver, like I think he can, and Dario Saric is suddenly a really reliable backup big, which they've been looking for, this is a Denver team that could still win the finals. I know people are lower on them. I'm one of them, but I'm not going to be insane and say that they aren't a team that could for sure be raising the Larry O'Brien. Whenever you have the best player in the world, you have a real chance, especially when you give them a team that's as talented as Denver is, even if the offseason did not really go their way. Then we get to another Western Conference contender who I'm going to put in my favorites tier, and I know people are going to call me biased, but even the betting odds agree. They are the favorites in the Western Conference right now. It is my Oklahoma City Thunder. They were just the #1 overall seed. They lost in the second round to Dallas, but I would say they probably improved maybe the most out of any squad in the Western Conference. Caruso is a massive addition defensively and a knockdown shooter. You added as well Isaiah Hartenstein, who fixes the rebounding issue, who can give them a number of versatile looks with Hartenstein at the 5 and Chet at the 4, or one or the other at the 5, and Hartenstein has shown shooting ability so they can still play 5 out. He adds a reliable screener, which this team needed. They're going to get big second-year jumps, I would presume, from Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, whose lives are going to be made easier by the talent around them. And even if he could pop a little bit in Chicago, Josh Giddey was a negative a lot of times on the court for the Thunder, especially when they got into the playoffs. So now you add one of the best role players in the world in Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, who was a unbelievably important piece to what the Knicks did throughout the playoffs last year as their starting center, and those are just 2 depth guys on top of what they already have. They have the coach of the year, great players all up and down the roster. This is a team that, in my opinion, and of course it's led by Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a top 5 guy, is poised to once again be one of the top teams in the Western Conference. Maybe it's the bias talking, but I think right now if I had to pick the finals matchup, it's Celtics Thunder, which you might call me crazy for, but again, on the betting odds, all the sports books, they have this as the likely or most likely finals outcome. I think it's for good reason. We also need to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, who are another team I'm going to put in the playoff probables. They added DeJounte Murray, which I've noted a couple of times. I like the trade, but that it does feel like a bit of a clunky fit alongside CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson. I feel like they need a bit more volume shooting on that roster. I really don't like their lack of any starting caliber center at this moment unless Yves Missi really jumps from day one. But I just feel like there's too much talent for them to not be a probable playoff team. We'll see if Ingram's on the roster by the end of the season, because I think there's a world where they deal him for a big or just someone who fits a little bit better. But yeah, they just got a lot of talent, and if Zion can stay healthy, they could maybe even move up to like an outside shot team if everything really clicks and they do add that center that I think everybody agrees that they need. Sacramento Kings, I feel pretty similar to the Pelicans with them. They feel like, to me, a playoff team. DeRozan, adding him there is going to boost the offense even further. I've had some question marks about the fit, but the more I think about it, I think it will end up working. The defense is going to be a problem, and the depth is not the greatest with Sacramento, but when you have Sabonis and Fox, who is a fantastic duo, you've added DeRozan, who is an all-star level player alongside them. I think Keegan Murray could take a bit of a jump. I'm keeping an eye on him as maybe one of their biggest swing factors. I think Mike Brown's a really good coach. They were right there, 1 game away from making the playoffs last season. I think they improved and will go ahead and make it. They are also a team that I don't feel like will deal with many injuries. They don't have that many injury-prone players on the roster, knock on wood, for Kings fans. So I do think they'll be back in the playoffs again, not starting another very, very long playoff drought. The Houston Rockets are one of those teams that feels like, to me, has the most sway between people. If you ask some people, they're like, oh, they're for sure going to be a playoff team this year. If you ask some people, they think that they're still a couple of years away. I have them on the cusp. If they make it into the playoffs, it would not be surprising. They have a ton of depth. It depends on what we see, really. I feel like with Jalen Green, does he showcase any of what he did at the end of last season? Was that just a flash in the pan? And the rest of the young roster, too. I mean, Jabari Smith Jr., Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Alperen Şengün, all these young players who jumps and who maybe takes a little bit of a regression or doesn't quite progress the way that maybe you need them to reach a playoff level. They don't have the top-end talent of like the Warriors or the Clippers or really any of these teams above them, but they're just so deep. They're so good defensively, which gives them a very high floor on any given night. They're never going to be a squad that gets run off the court consistently, because they can at the very least give you that big problem defensively between Dylan Brooks as well out there. Fred VanVleet did a great job playmaking last year and setting up the offense. They do need to take a bit more of an offensive jump, and that's where some of the young players come in. So if they really can click, and this is a playoff team, I wouldn't be that surprised. A video on them is probably coming pretty soon, by the way. Getting back up to the Western Conference contenders, the Minnesota Timberwolves are another one of those teams. We're just in the Western Conference Finals. Have Anthony Edwards, who I don't think is quite up to that top 10 player quite yet, but he's really close. He's in that conversation. And after this season, I don't think it'll be much of a convo. I think he'll be right there in that mix. Cat had a great season, did deal with an injury towards the end of the year, but had some really good playoff moments too. Gobert became that defensive player of the year. He really found his footing in Minnesota. Jaden McDaniels, he's a big swing guy, but I'm interested to see what he can do this season. Mike Conley's getting older, but it feels like he just never ages out of being a really consistent role player. Yeah, this is a good team. They just got to find more consistency offensively, and maybe with this year with Anthony Edwards improving, that will be there. It's just a matter of if it can carry over into the playoffs, because the defense is once again going to be locked down. And yeah, if they won the NBA Finals, wouldn't be that surprised. Another team that people might disagree with me, I think the Sixers are another I could definitely see a team. The biggest obstacle is the fact that they would have to play the Celtics, but this is a squad that if Porzingis is out, feels potentially beatable, and I do think this Sixers team is really well equipped to give them problems and everybody else in the East. They have Paul George out there who gives them a good wing defender. They had Kelly Oubre as well. They finally have two competent wing players, which it feels like it's been forever since that's been the case with the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid is a top 5 player. When he is healthy, he is one of the most dominant forces in basketball. I know there have been playoff problems, but a lot of that has been injury related, and I do think out there, despite clearly being banged up against the Knicks this past season, he had a pretty good playoff series, even though the fourth quarter was a bit rough here and there. Maxey had an amazing debut as that 2 option in the playoffs against the Knicks. I feel like those top 2 guys, alongside some of the depth they added, will make this team hyper competitive. Now they've got to stay healthy, which maybe should move them down to the outside shot, but I'm going to keep them up here. I have to have some East teams in the I could definitely see it. And I maybe am one of the only believers that if this Sixers team raised the Larry O'Brien, I'm not that surprised. For the Pacers, I thought about putting them in outside shot, but I think I feel more comfortable with playoff probable. I just think they're a little bit away from a title. They need like that one more piece or a little bit more experience, or maybe both, before I look at them as that squad that could be raising the Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of 2025. Halliburton is one of those guys. He's one of the best playmakers and efficient scorers in the entire NBA. He's electric. You've got Siakam, who's a great compliment to him, and an amazing playoff run. Like Nembhard feels like he could take a jump. Miles Turner is one of the best bigs in the league. They've got depth with like Aaron Nesmith and TJ McConnell, and Benedict Mathurin's going to be back from injury. Obi Toppin. This is just a great all-around team, but I just don't think they quite have the top-end talent of some of these squads above them in these categories. And also I do worry about them defensively. Offensively, they're going to be a juggernaut. They improved a lot of times throughout the season at moments defensively, but I need to see a full year of them being a better defensive team alongside that elite offense to see them as one of the clear threats to take down these top teams in the NBA. For the Brooklyn Nets, they're the most obvious capture the flag team I've ever seen. They're going to also deal away pieces if they weren't terrible enough already. They're going to trade Cam Johnson, I would imagine, Dorian Finney-Smith, amongst probably others. I am excited to watch this team and see like Cam Thomas, what he can do with this squad, like Noah Clowney with some actual NBA run. Nick Claxton is a really fun young big. It's just not going to result in many wins. If they go like 12-70, I wouldn't be that surprised. I imagine they're going to do everything in their power to get to the bottom of the standings now that they have their pick back. They really want Cooper Flagg to restart this new era, and it would be fun to see him land there. It's just going to come down to the lottery gods, which is the whole goal of this season for Brooklyn. Now we've got Orlando, who I'm going to put in the playoff probable tier. I think it's just a year away from them being potentially championship contenders. They almost won a playoff series. They made a big acquisition in KCP. They've got a top-end talent in Paolo who could really jump to superstar status this season if the efficiency picks up a little bit. A great second option in Franz Wagner, who if his efficiency picks up a little bit, could definitely be an all-star. Jalen Suggs, one of the best defenders in the league. A great defense in general with Jonathan Isaac. If he's able to stay fully healthy on the court for a lot of the season, they could very well be the best defense in the league. I love what the Magic are building. I just think it's still a year away. They're really young. They don't have a second-round appearance in them quite yet, and I don't know if Powell is quite ready to be that #1 option on a championship-level team, or a team that even has an outside shot to do so, but I think you give them a couple more years, and they're definitely in that conversation. It's just a little too early for me. Real quick, I want to do a rapid fire some of the capture the flag teams. Like I think the Blazers pretty clearly are going to be the worst team in the Western Conference. I like a lot of the young talent like Scoot and Simons and Sharp. I like that they added Denny Avdija in a trade. I thought that was a smart move, but they're just not trying to be competitive, or at least they shouldn't be. They still need to go ahead and find that guy that's going to be the player for them. Cooper Flagg would be exactly that, or any number of guys at the top of the stacked 2025 draft class. So yeah, the Blazers are going to be pretty bad this season. And same thing with the Wizards. They will also be one of the teams pursuing Cooper Flagg. They've got talent. Maybe Jordan Poole gets back to his usual self this season, or at least the guy we saw that 1 year in Golden State, so maybe that's not his usual self. I think eventually they trade Kyle Kuzma, Jonas Valanciunas, who they signed randomly. I think he'll be moved throughout the season. Yeah, there are young players I'm excited about, like Bilal and Alex Sarr and Bob Carrington, but they're not trying to be good. I would be surprised if they made any pursuit for a seed beyond the 15th one in the Eastern Conference, although I think Brooklyn's going to end up having them beat out. But yeah, those are the teams I think they're going to go ahead and wrap up that capture the flag tier. Next up, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who I'm going to put in the outside shot spot. I know some people might think this is too high. Some people might think this is too low. I've seen a lot of people look at the Grizzlies as a team to shock the world this season. I feel like they've got such a wide range of outcomes. They could either be a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, or they could be a playing team if injuries pop up again, if they don't click the way it seems like they could. But I'm buying into this team as a potential very outside threat. I'm not picking them amongst my top 4 contenders in the Western Conference, but if they really flip the switch this season and it all works out, there is a super outside path to them being the Western Conference champions. Like, John Morant is one of the best players in the world. I think he's going to be on a revenge tour. Desmond Bane, an elite extra option alongside him in that backcourt, or I guess Marcus Smart might be in the backcourt, Desmond Bane at the 3. We'll see how they make that thing work, but Desmond Bane is an elite offensive weapon who I think only has more and more to prove. Marcus Smart gives them a great defender. Jaren Jackson, of course, another decoy on the roster, so they've got 2 of them. They've got Zach Edey as a big man to set some screens, give that Steven Adams effect, and if he really jumps off the page this season as a rookie, the Rookie of the Year favorite, that could be a big swing factor for them if Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams are really ready to contribute for a championship level team this season. There's a lot of ways that this Grizzlies team becomes a formidable force the second they're back out there fully healthy. Now, there may be some rust to begin the season, but by the end of the year, if they find their groove, the Grizzlies are going to be one of the scary teams in the West, if you ask me. So again, they're not one of my top picks to win the Western Conference. I don't think they will, but if you told me that we're in the reality where it does end up happening, I'm not calling you crazy. Another team that could go up there in that tier 2 is the Milwaukee Bucks. They're behind the Sixers, Celtics, and one other squad in my hierarchy of Eastern Conference contenders, just because I don't trust Doc Rivers as the head coach. I was also very disappointed and burned by them last season. Like, I was saying, oh, it's going to be them and the Celtics. Can we just fast forward to when those two play in the Eastern Conference Finals? And maybe if Giannis didn't get hurt, that would have been what ended up happening, but obviously they were first round exit. They were mostly unimpressive throughout the season. But I'm hopeful for a Dame bounce back. I like the additions of DeLon Wright and Gary Trent Jr. They do so have Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez, who, when healthy, are very good players, and Bobby Portis. It's still a good roster led by Giannis, who maybe just had the best individual season of his career last year, or at least one of them. He was like Shaq on offense. I can't say that that team has no chance of winning a championship. I don't know if it happens because it's going to take a lot of health and Doc Rivers to win something, which hasn't happened in forever, but there is a chance. The Cavaliers are a playoff probable team. I'm going to stick them there. They could theoretically get to outside shot if they made another addition, but I think they need somebody to really lock down that wing spot. Garland's going to have a big bounce back year for them to make some more noise. Allen and Mobley, I still don't know if the front court quite always works when you get to the playoffs. Like, they're both incredible players. Mobley was one of my favorite players going to the draft. He's an all-world defender. Allen was unbelievable last season, had probably the best year of his career, but I just wonder how consistent it's going to be in the playoffs. Like, is anything going to happen crazy off the bench? They're good for sure. If they didn't make the playoffs, I'd be surprised. I think they're right around a 50-win team. I'm excited for them this season, but I don't think they're up to the level of the other teams above them in the Eastern Conference, including the New York Knicks, who I have as one of the other squads that I could definitely see winning the championship. This is the best Knicks team in my lifetime. Brunson as your lead guy. I've always kind of questioned it, but after this run this past season, with how good the team is around him, I think he's capable. Julius Randle coming back is going to be big. They needed somebody else who could get buckets throughout that playoff run and really all throughout the second half of the season, where he did not play whatsoever, and they still got the second seed. They have, of course, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges on the wings now, which is huge when the biggest obstacle to win the East is the Boston Celtics. You need those wing defenders for like JB and Jason Tatum. They're also guys that just don't need the ball in their hands. Amazing complementary, high-level role players, like S-tier role players, which is great to have on any team. They've got Josh Hart off the bench and Dante DiVincenzo. It's an amazing roster. Deuce McBride. Really, the only weakness is the big man spot. Mitchell Robinson is good, but I would love if they added a bit more depth. And if they do that, there's just really no holes on this team whatsoever. They are one of the most loaded rosters, top to bottom, in the entire league. Getting to some more lottery teams, I'm going to put the Hawks there. If they're a play-in team, I think that's pretty realistic, but I just don't see them beating out any of the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference to eventually make the playoffs through the play-in tournament. Trae Young is still one of the best players in the East, so he's going to elevate that offense just by himself. He is a walking, pretty decent offensive team, but Beyond that, I don't think the defense is going to be anything too crazy. I like the addition of Dyson Daniels. Excited to see what he can do, and Zachary Risashe and maybe Onyeka Okongwu this season. Jalen Johnson feels like a very big sleeper MIP candidate. I don't think people realize that he still has so much room to grow, especially now that DeJounte Murray is gone. He's going to be their second option. So yeah, there'll be a lottery team, but it'll be a fun one, and I'm really just interested to see what eventually happens with Trae Young. Hornets, similar situation where I think they could be a play-in team. If LaMelo Ball can stay on the court, that is, I guess. He has not managed to do so, like, at all throughout his career. Last time we saw him fully healthy, he was an all-star guard, one of the youngest all-stars ever. If he can be out there, he can definitely replicate that. But it's just not been a guarantee. Brandon Miller could have an amazing second season, especially if LaMelo is out there to support him, to get him the ball and take some pressure off. I like Mark Williams a lot, but he's also been injured. It's just a young core I really like, but one that's super injury-prone. So I don't know who's going to be out there on the court. But if they do keep their team healthy relatively, if they're a playing team, wouldn't surprise me. They've got a lot of interesting upside. Another squad who I'll just real quick put in that same spot is the Bulls. Kobe White, I'm excited about. I think he could be really good again this season, although I worry about Josh Giddey taking the ball out of his hands, but maybe Giddey has a bit of a breakthrough. They do still have Zach LaVine, and as long as he's on that team, he's going to elevate them. I know people are down on him, but he is still a good player, even if the contract is egregious. Vucevic is just straight up bad, though, which is a concern at this point. Patrick Williams, what will he do this season? They've got like Ayo Dosunmu. It's an overall interesting team. Like Matas Buzelis is still there. I like that they added Jalen Smith, a young big, just taking a flyer on him. It's not going to be enough to make them a playoff team whatsoever. I think they'll be right there in the play-in race alongside like the Hornets, the Hawks, and I'll just spoil it here, the Raptors, who I'll talk about in a moment, but they're not going to make the playoffs. And for the Raptors, maybe my most sneaky potential team, if there was one squad that was going to knock somebody off in a play-in game to make it into the playoffs, it might be the Raptors. Scotty Barnes was really good this past season. RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley, when they both got there from New York, were amazing. Really efficient, really fun players to watch. Like Jakob Poeltl's a good big, Kelly Olynyk. It's a team that I think has some spice to them. They could definitely make a lot of games tougher in some of the top East teams than I think people will be expecting. Now, will they make the playoffs? No, but I feel pretty good about them being in that play-in race. And again, I wouldn't want to face this Raptors team necessarily in a game to try and make it into the playoffs if I'm one of those top 8 teams and I've got to win one more to make it. The Raptors are one of the scariest teams, in my opinion, to face in that one-game elimination scenario. So I'll put them there in that lottery spot as well as the Pistons. They're going to be the final team to land in the lottery section. I really want to say they'll make the playoffs this year, but I just don't think they're going to go from a 14-win team to that. I like Cade a lot. I've said a lot of times I'm a Cade believer. I think he'll take a jump. Jaden Ivey, we'll have to see. Same thing with Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. Marcus Sasser, what will Ron Holland do in his first season? They've got so many young players. Did I say Asar Thompson? If I didn't, him as well. Like, they've got so many interesting young players. I like that Monty Williams is gone now. He just seemingly was sabotaging them. It felt like at moments. They added Tobias Harris, which gives them an NBA player, even if he's not a great one. Yeah, it'll be a year of improvement. The Pistons will be better. I think the record will be like double what it was. They'll win like 28, 30 some games, but it's not going to be enough to get them into the playoffs, even though I would love to see the Pistons finally break through. It will not be one of those years where they again have the worst record and get the 5th pick. I can promise you that. And finally, we have the Miami Heat, another playoff probable. They just don't miss the playoffs. Jimmy Butler, maybe his last season with the franchise. We'll have to wait and see how the contract situation works out. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier. I'm excited to see what he can do in a full season with the team. Duncan Robinson was really good last season. Jaime Jaquez. Kel'el Ware was a really good draft pick by them who looked great in Summer League. So yeah, this will be a good team. Also, it's just Eric Spoelstra, the best coach in the business. They're not going to miss the playoffs, even if I don't think they'll be as good as some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. They'll be right there in the mix. And once again, a team that's a little bit scared to face off in any playoff scenario. So yeah, this is my tier list, which I now just realize kind of cuts off the Miami Heat. So let me go ahead and even the Cavaliers a little bit until I move it over. Let me go ahead and zoom out one more time so you can see the full tier list right here. Yeah, so in the favorites, I have the Celtics and Thunder. I could definitely see it. Mavericks, Nuggets, Timberwolves, Sixers, and Knicks. Outside shot, the Grizzlies, the Bucks, the playoff probables, the Lakers, the Suns, the Pelicans, the Kings, the Pacers, the Magic, the Cavs, and the Heat. On the cusp are the Clippers, the Warriors, and the Rockets. Lottery, Jazz, Spurs, Hawks, Hornets, Bulls, Raptors, and Pistons. And capture the flag. Teams playing that game are the Nets, Wizards, and Blazers. That's my tier list for the moment of NBA squads. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Who's too high? Who's too low? Where did I mess up? Where should your favorite team be? Leave a like and subscribe down there. I feel like I just said that, but do it anyways. It helps the channel out a ton. Let me know which other type of videos you want to see throughout the rest of the offseason because we have a lot of time to kill before the year begins. And yeah, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you all later. Real one, say it back.